Empty Nester's Life. Join Jessica and Brent on the Read for Effect YouTube channel. Adventures, topics, and fun.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Podcast Interview 001. And the mystery guest for today is Dave Bonn. Dave is co-owner and founder of American Pistol Association. Dave, give us the essence of your business. What exactly do you guys do?
Well, what we do is we have a company that specializes in self-defense. And we teach 47 different courses along the lines of ground fighting, knife fighting, pistol, rifle, shotgun, low light, room clearing. We teach SWAT teams how to go into buildings and clear them. And it's based off my military background and training. Probably one of the most heavily certified instructors in the Midwest. Pretty much spent 24 years in the military with the host of the show.
We had a chance to talk. The thing with Dave is Dave's a very well-traveled fellow. He's an American. He didn't have the standard, Wheaties and Cheerios type upbringing. And I'll tell you what we'll do is I'll have links to all the ways to contact American Pistol Association down in the description. And for anybody watching, if you've got questions specifically for Dave and his company, just drop them in the comments down below. That's a really quick way to give us feedback for our content. Just a reminder, this channel is, as much as we can, completely driven by the wants, needs, and desires of all the subscribers. So if there's anything you want to know about after the video, or if you'd like to be contacted, just drop that down in the comments below. We'll go to question number one. Dave, when you think back to your formative years, person has good examples and bad examples. Question number one is a really good example you had, maybe a mentor type. Give us an example of kind of the opposite. Give an example of somebody that wasn't such a good example.
Okay, and that's a interesting question. So basically, motivating individuals in my life versus negative motivating people in my life. And I don't like negative people in my life because they just waste your time. But I have had some negative motivators which have led me to be successful. So I've basically been given lemons. I made lemonade out of the situation. I think that's what's allowed me to be very successful in life. So let's talk about the beginning of my military career. Well, 27 years ago now. I had a recruiter, was quite unethical. He was a liar. I figured it out because I didn't join the military at the average age of 18 like most people do. I joined at 28 after I went to college in the United States. And so I got the United States. I'm Canadian. So when I understood that this recruiter was not treating me fairly or honestly, and his loyalty was to we'll call it his mission. Later in my military career, about 3 years after I'd gotten in, I had the opportunity to work with an infantry battalion, and then I got hired for the National Guard to be an active recruiter for them. And I took the negative of a guy that had no integrity, no loyalty, and I became a very successful recruiter.
How would you quantify that? How do you quantify success in that universe?
Okay, so in the first 2 years of being a recruiter, I attained what we call a master recruiting badge. But that doesn't quantify it. Anyone can get one of those. 2 years is the shortest possible time you can earn it, and I did it. As an E5's regular plain old buck sergeant. What I really would like to state is I never recruited someone I didn't want to spend any time in a foxhole with. Mm-hmm. That's the number one complaint of your troops in the field. They're like, who put this guy in the Army with us? Whether the guy was an immoral guy, he had lack of integrity, had no loyalty. Perfect example is when I was in Iraq in 05-06, like you, I basically was in a squad. I had recruited 7 out of the 11 guys that I had. So I picked my own team.
How valuable is having some ability to affect the team that you end up with?
if you've been honest with people and you have a reputation for telling them the truth all the time, even if it's going to be terrible, people can accept the known. The unknown scares the hell out of people. And in a combat zone, that would not be very advantageous. If I said, hey, you're going to be cold, you're going to be wet, you're going to be miserable, but I'm going to take care of you. You trust me because I've proven it time and time again in the past in the civilian world when you were getting into the military. And then I trained you throughout that time, that's kind of what I used to do. I used to train every recruit that I enlisted. They already were used to upfront and I'm going to say brazenly honest. There we go.
Well, talk a little bit about an example of where'd you learn that from?
Well, I learned that's the exact opposite of what that recruiter did to me. Going back to your original question, who is my biggest negative motivator? That would have been my recruiter. I'm not even going to say his name because he really doesn't rate.
Sure. Because
negative people don't rate in my life, so they don't even deserve a mention. That's what I based it off of. I just did the opposite, and it's really simple because I'm a simple guy.
All the different endeavors that you've been involved with, we've known each other a long time, and we're talking, ice hockey, played defense, played a little bit of offense. You've talked about coaches you've had. You've talked about working armed security as a youngster. You've talked about a lot of travel. Talked about track and field, right, at the scholarship level. And so give the viewers, give the subscribers an example of, when's a time when you kind of surprised yourself?
Surprising myself. I'm going to go to 1982. I'm going to go back. In 1982, I competed in a international competition called the Commonwealth Games. I was 16 years old. If you look it up, I actually still hold the world record for being the youngest competitor in the 10,000 meter final of the Commonwealth Games. It was in Brisbane, Australia.
For context, talk about the Commonwealth. What are we talking about when we talk about the Commonwealth?
The Commonwealth is basically the British Commonwealth that encompasses Canada, of course, Great Britain, Scotland,
New Zealand,
a number
Australia.
Of countries in Africa like Kenya, Tanzania, and you can't include the United States in that because they're not part of the Commonwealth. Of course, Australia. Okay, because New Zealand, huge international competition. I was supposed to run 10,000 meters, 5,000 meters in the marathon in that competition. Took a lot of heat in the press and basically got beaten soundly in the race. I think I surprised myself because I was probably too young and hard-headed to understand I was way outclassed because I was running against world record holders. In the 5,000 meters, I was running against, or supposed to be running against, a guy named David Moorcroft. So 5,000 meters is 3.1 mile. He held the world record at that time. I remember it was 13 minutes, 0.32 100ths of a second. To put that in perspective, he's running sub 430 miles back to back for 3 miles, which he was the fastest in the world. One of my heroes. Long story short, I got soundly whipped, but I finished the race. I still hold the world record for being the youngest competitor in the Commonwealth Games in a final.
What country was Moorcroft from?
He's from England. England had a slew in the early 80s of great distance runners. A guy named David Moorcroft, 5,000 meter world record holder. A guy named Sebastian Coe, 800 meter world record holder. A guy named Steve Ovett, 1 mile world record holder. Great runners. You can look it up. Gold medalists throughout the Olympics. When we didn't go to the 80 Olympics, England went, just swept in medals because they truly had a great middle distance, long distance running crew.
Shades of Chariots of Fire, huh?
Yes, pretty much. Only 50 years later.
Yeah, Chariots of Fire. Who would have thought that we would go down that road? You want to talk about an obscure reference? One of the things I loved about that movie was the international sense of it. My third question, give the subscribers a little feel about a time when, being a security-centric person, you had a red flag that kind of popped up that you reacted to or took note of. Afterwards, you were like, hey, that was good that I paid attention to that. Give us an example of a red flag that you noticed at some point during your extensive travels.
I've traveled from a very young age. At a very young age, we moved from Canada to the Caymen Islands at the age of 4. Caymen Islands is a tax haven. You probably hear about it in movies. That's why it has a lot of banks, because our famous tax tyrant in the United States, King George III, he had one of his princes going around collecting taxes from all the colonies, the Commonwealth colonies, wrecked on the reef of the Grand Cayman Island. And the Cayman Islands was made up of a population of runaway slaves and pirates. So it's a very eclectic island. Going back to the travel question and security, the Cayman Islands affected me in the way that I got to see different people from a different culture. And then I went back from the Cayman Islands back to Canada for schooling. I went to a military school. And then I competed throughout the world in track and field. And that's what got me down to the United States on a track and field scholarship. Just to, give you an idea. So when I mean around the world, I mean, I've been in countries like in 1982, I went from Canada to the United States to Hawaii, which is still the United States, over to Australia, India, Pakistan, back to India, to Italy, Greece, and ended up in Germany. Then we went on to England, and then back to New York, LaGuardia Airport, and then back up to Canada. In less than 80 days, I went around the world.
Well, I was going to say that's around the world in 80 days. The channel does focus on reading, and so around the world in 80 days, Jules Verne.
Yeah, really interesting. And if you want to talk about reading, I wasn't just competing that whole time, because I was 16 years of age at the time. I just happened to be competing in different countries. The reason we ended up in the Middle East, because my father had a contract with a company called Citibank in the United States, and they had offices in Islamabad, Karachi, and Lahore. Okay. That's the only reason we were in Pakistan. I wasn't competing against Pakistanis there. He was teaching speed reading to Citibank. That's really why we got to travel so much, because my father went everywhere in the world, internationally, teaching speed reading to executives so they could get through their materials quicker and retain more.
Well, in 1982, if you think historically about what was going on, I noticed you didn't mention, for instance, Lebanon. You guys sort of circumvented Lebanon during that year.
That wasn't a good country to go to at that time.
Yeah, that was 2 years before the first Intifada, and a whole lot of bad stuff going on in Beirut at that time.
Yeah, well, remember the Marines that got blown up by a VBID, a vehicle-borne IED.
Yeah.
And they just ran through, and I believe they killed like 300 Marines. Is that correct? I can't remember exactly the number. I apologize, because I love Marines. I think Marines are great.
No, that's spot on.
That was the beginning of terrorist attacks in my lifetime, where it became very real. When I was in Pakistan, I was very wary, even at 16, of my personal security. Okay, I mean, when I was in, I believe it was Islamabad. Karachi used to be the capital. I think they changed it to Islamabad now. Right across from the Holiday Inn in Islamabad was a PLO camp, and I could see the guy marching on the walkway with his AK-47 at 16.
And so, PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, correct?
That is correct. To see it for real at that young an age, it really puts things in perspective. We could see from where we were in Pakistan, we went down to the place called the Khyber Pass. We could see the Russians. They were still occupying and marching on the actual Afghan-Pakistan border.
Yeah, that's 3 years into this post-Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. I mean, that must have been something to behold for a 16-year-old young man.
Oh, incredibly mind-boggling. Let's put it that way. You're seeing that you have no way to defend yourself, and you're in a different country, and it feels like you're the only white people there. So when people talk about racism and all that great stuff, I understand that better than most people. Let's put it that way. And it's because of my travels. I have to give total kudos to my parents for making sure I was well traveled as a young man.
You had mentioned previously with your mom traveling city streets, for instance, Islamabad, Karachi. Tell us a little bit about that and that dynamic.
Okay, so the dynamic was because we were with an American family that we were staying at their complex, we'll call it. They had guards. The women were supposed to walk behind us. As any 16-year-old schoolboy would do after seeing Indiana Jones, I bought a whip. Because, I couldn't buy myself a machine gun to deal with all the other people at the time. Actually, I probably could have, but my parents probably wouldn't have allowed it. So I bought a whip and a leather jacket. It was amazing. I just carried it around coiled in my hand. I never whipped anybody, just in case somebody wants to get offended from that. But I carried it around, and again, my mother and her friend, the female host, walked behind us, and my mother was blonde, right? Or is blonde. And so she stood out like a sore thumb, but she was told to walk behind the males because that's how they do it in those countries. And when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Or when in Pakistan, do as the Pakistanis do, in this case. So I walked around, and even though the whip was coiled in my hand, it's like the people knew the exact length of my whip. It's like we would part the sea of people as we were walking through. It was mind-boggling. It's like they knew the exact length of the whip, and we had a 12-foot circumference around us when we walked. And that actually served me well, as barbaric as it sounds. When we were in Iraq, as soldiers, just like in Iraq, when you travel, people don't respect handguns. They respect rifles. Or correction, I'm going to have to take that back. People respect handguns. They don't respect rifles.
Why is that?
Because basically Saddam Hussein's executioners carried handguns, and everybody had a rifle. So that being said, which is the exact opposite, handguns are not as powerful, but when they're used execution style, people respect that when someone has a handgun and tells them to do something. That means if you don't do it, you're going to get shot in the head. Simple math.
So really it was not so much the power or the capability of that particular tool. It was more the content of the heart of the person that carried that tool.
Pretty much. Or maybe that basically you were terrorized by people with pistols. There you go. Yeah. Make it even more simple.
Wrapping up the main part of the questions, knuckleball question for today is, would you generally categorize yourself as rock or paper or scissors, and why? Go.
I would categorize myself as scissors.
Scissors. How come?
Because paper is fantastic and it's very malleable. It can be used to articulate thoughts on paper. That's great. Rock is kind of a bull in a china shop sometimes. So I'm not looking at, but it is it's very hard. It's not malleable like paper, because scissors are a tool, and I'm very adept with using all kinds of tools because I can adapt. I can use it to break rock. I can use it to cut scissors. It's just in the application. So I'm a very adaptable individual. So I adapt as surgical scissors. There we go. I'm going to add to it.
There you go. Fair enough. Been great conversation. I think it went some places we didn't really expect it to go, that's why we do these things. But now we're going to get into the lightning round. And so we're coming up on the end of 2021, getting ready to go obviously into 2022. And we have this game called 22 for 22. And so this is 22 lightning round questions. You make a pick and you explain why you made your pick. You ready to go?
Ready. Right. Ready. Let's go.
Okay. First one. Medium well or rare?
Rare.
Why?
Because if you can't taste it, it's not worth eating.
Beer or wine?
Beer. Because beer has a better flavor to me. Happens to be Guinness. I'm going to say Guinness. There you go.
I'd buy
It's
that.
a meal. It's a meal.
Uber or taxis?
I'm going to say Uber, just because flexibility, and my brother-in-law hates it.
Makes sense. Lures or flies?
I'm going to go with lures because I don't have the skill to make flies.
Downhill or cross country?
Cross country, definitely, because you can go downhill cross country. You just have to be very skilled.
Well, if you recall, there was a couple of dudes that they tagged to be on the Kansas National Guard biathlon team. Remember that?
Yeah.
I think we were the only two dudes that knew how to sort of shoot and knew how to sort of cross-country ski. But then, unfortunately, some guys flew some planes into buildings, and that was all she wrote for that. All right, next one, scuba or snorkel?
That's actually a tough one because I enjoy both, but I have to say scuba because you can do it 100 feet deeper.
Cheerios or Wheaties?
I'm going to say Wheaties because they technically are a little bit better for you.
St. Bernard or Jack Russell?
St. Bernard, because Jack Russells are just too dang small. If I wanted a cat, I'd get a cat.
That's hey, fair enough. Push-ups or bench press?
Push-ups, because you can do them anywhere.
I buy that. All you need is just a horizontal plane, right?
That's it.
Fixed wing or rotary wing?
I'm going to say fixed wing because fixed wing gives you two versus rotary. I believe we're talking about just one, and more is better. Is that correct? I don't know. I'm not an aviation guy.
I don't know. It's your answers, man.
There you go. I'm just making it up as I go then.
Speak slowly, right? Infantrymen aren't that quick on the uptake. De Niro or Pacino?
De Niro or Pacino is what you said?
Yep.
That's tough. They're both fantastic answers, but I'm going to go with Pacino because he stays out of politics.
I'd buy that.
Yeah, it's got to be Pacino.
Gonna send this fine young man back to Oregon. All right, last 11. Batman or Spider-Man?
Batman. Because Batman has a plan to kill everybody in the Justice League. He basically follows Mattis's rule of be nice to everybody, but have a plan to kill them. And that's why Batman's the winner.
Michael Jackson or Ray Charles?
Ray Charles. Because Ray Charles is a classic. Not disrespecting Michael Jackson, but I would like to go and have a cup of coffee with Ray Charles.
Yeah, fair enough. I'd buy that. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, that is a very difficult one. I'm a big Star Trek fan because William Shatner, another former Canadian, was intriguing to me. And he also went to the same high school I did. So I'm going to go with Star Trek. Yes, we went to the same high school, West Hill High School in Montreal.
Well, and they've got that new series on Amazon. Shatner just went up into space on Bezos' rocket.
Yeah. The guy's an interesting cat.
Lego or Erector set?
Erector set. Because you actually, instead of just pressing things together, you actually have to use bolts and nuts and gears and mechanics. Not that they have an advanced Lego, they're just not as advanced as Erector sets.
Rommel or Patton?
Patton.
Because?
He read his damn book. And he studied the enemy because he understands the enemy gets a vote.
I read your book, you son of a buck. All All right. Stephen King or Stephen Covey?
I'm going to go with Stephen King because he truly can capture fear in his movies, books. There we go.
Slot cars or model trains?
Well, I didn't hear that one.
Slot cars or model trains?
I'm going to go with model trains just because they've always intrigued me, especially this time of year. A train and Christmas kind of work together for some reason for me.
Elton John or Billy Joel?
Oh, wow. Okay, I have to say Billy Joel. First record album I ever owned that I purchased, the old vinyl ones, not like stuff today, was Glass Houses. That's the first record I ever bought. So it's Billy Joel.
Was pressure on that one? That's the picture of him with the rock in front of the house, right?
That's right, Glass Houses.
Soccer or hockey?
I have to go with hockey, although I love soccer, don't get me wrong, because hockey encompasses a sport because of speed, and it is a violent sport, and you get to hit your opponent legally in the game. So got to go with speed and violence, which are two of my favorite things.
Violence of action, right? Violence of action.
Violence of action. You need what? Surprise, speed, and violence. Okay, so that's why hockey.
The last two. Compound or recurve?
I have to go with compound because although recurve is classic, compound allows you to be incredibly dynamic and with less resistance.
And the last one, and I pause and take a sip of this delicious Libyan Intenso coffee.
Okay, I'll do the same.
All right, and the last 22 for 22, this or that, lightning round question. Vince Vaughn or Jack Black?
Vince Vaughn. Because he has well, I can't say Jack Black doesn't have range. I just like Vince Vaughn. He's funny. And I remember a movie that he was in with one of my favorite actors. And he said, Vegas, baby, Vegas. And he just does it for me. He's funny. He's a funny guy.
Yeah,
not
right
that Jack Black is, but if you make me choose, I'm going to definitely choose Vaughn all day long.
Right on. So
okay, so now I'm going to get to ask you a question. Here we go. It's 23.
23.
Okay. So I'm going to say you start with this. Okay, I didn't know we're doing it at the end of the video.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we can edit it.
So you can say, hey, this is a snippet of the guy. So the question to you, Brent, is what's your most favorite Sergeant Bonn quote? Because this was my actual answer to your first question, or second question actually, of when did I surprise myself? And you actually surprised me because you told me this quote that I said to you. Do you remember what it is?
I don't. I've got another answer, but I don't remember the quote you're talking about. If you mention it, I'm sure I'll remember.
It's got something to do with painting.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, because that was my motto for years. And what that quote is, if you paint me in a corner, I'm gonna stomp all over your freaking paint. That's
a Sergeant Bonnism there, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, honestly, if you want to know what kind of video there's going to be, that kind of sums me up. in the way that, hey, if you go ahead and think you're gonna box me in, you're gonna pay.
Yeah.
Because guess what? That's just my whole ideology. All right. I've got to persevere. I don't fight the fights that I can win. I fight the fights worth fighting.
Well, sure. And that's an important dynamic.
That's how I roll. That's how I've always been. That's probably why I'm not Sergeant Major of the Army today, because I'm not a politically correct individual.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I'm okay with that, because you know what? I can look in the mirror every day and say, yeah, may not be the prettiest face, but at least I have integrity.
No, fair enough. And my answer to that question as far as a quote was, you running up to a battalion formation with a guidon in your hand, getting ready to plant the guidon in the ground, and you planted it so hard that you snapped that guidon staff clean in two. That was impressive.
I don't remember that.
Wow. I remember it.
God, I'm getting old. I have Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
All right. Dementia.
So here's what we're going to close with. Your assignment as a Read for Effect interview veteran is to go out, and you had mentioned recruiting. You need to go out and recruit one person that will be featured on a future Read for Effect podcast interview.
Okay.
We do these once a month. Right now I've got 6 people on the list, and I just need you to add one person that would be an interesting person of acclaim.
All right. I'll figure that out.
Figure that out and get back to me.
Honestly, it should be Becky, and I'll tell you why. She's a travel agent.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you
Perfect.
talk about travel with a person that lives it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to go in my book.
And I can even give you some questions. Before she was married to me, where had she traveled to?
There you go. That sounds like an excellent interview.
It's a great question. And then after, where had she been?
Yeah.
And, after we were married. And it's going to be a mind-boggling answer.
Yeah.
Because Americans don't travel enough.
No, they don't. No, that's for
They
sure.
don't. They, some people don't even get out of their state. And I already said, education is traveling, and traveling is education. You learn so much by traveling. I don't have any curveballs for you to throw in there, but
Right. Well, hey, so coming to the end of everything, wrapping up, I think we went down some rabbit holes that were hopefully full of value for anybody watching. To any of the subscribers or viewers, if you find value in content like this, I would invite you to subscribe. Click the subscribe bell so that you don't miss any of our content. And to our guest for today, Dave Bonn. Dave, wanted to thank you for your time. I've got Becky down here as number 7 on the guest list for a forthcoming Read for Effect podcast interview. And last word is yours, man.
Last word's mine. Thanks for having me. I think Becky will be a great choice because she's a travel agent and she specializes in 2 things: Disney traveling. So if you're taking kids or grandkids to Disney and you want to have your trip planned, she could do that for you because that's her specialty. And then if you don't want to go with the kids, because that's the beauty of being an empty nester, go to a place like Sandals. You can go to a Sandals resort. It's kind of like what I call a landlubber's cruise. Guess what? I would look forward to seeing her and talking with you about empty nesters traveling. All right, there we go. That is my last word. Thanks again for having me.
Empty Nester's Life. Join Jessica and Brent on the Read for Effect YouTube channel. Adventures, topics, and fun.